Welcome everybody to a very important evening for all of us. I'm going to just take a moment to introduce my colleague, Rabbi Moshe Plutchok Shlita, who is, as many of you know, and possibly all of you know, the Rav of the Kehillas Avas Yisrael, Rosh Hashiva in our midst as well, who is co-sponsoring with his Kehillah tonight. He has another engagement and has to leave, but he's going to say a few words in honor of our evening and of our guest speaker, whom I'm going to introduce in a couple of minutes, Rabbi Moshe Plutchok.
Thank you, Rabbi Feitman. I'm going to stay for a little while. I have a chasana, and thank you so much for understanding. I just want to know, every time I do anything with you, I'm always overwhelmed. Besides the big Talmud Chacham Shaft, you're a goyin in Midas. It's so nice to be associated with you. It's really beautiful. Thank you. He's shaking his head. He knows. I want to just say a story. I want to say a little Maisa. I don't know what Rabbi Horowitz is going to say, but I'm assuming it's going to be very, valuable advice. But one time I was by Siyum. Reb Zelig Epstein was there. Reb Zelig was the Rosh Yeshiva of Shara Torah in Queens. And it was in Ur Shraga, it was a camp. And the Mesaimim would line up and everybody would make a Siyum. There were about like 50 or 60 Siyumim. It was a Beis Medrash, a little larger than this, like a camp. And he started talking. And he talked about, pre-World War II. He was at a convention. It was the last convention before the World War, and Rav Baruch Ber was there, and Rav Chaim Oizer was there. And Rav Baruch Ber, everybody knows, was extremely dedicated to Limud HaTorah. And he got up and he spoke for an hour, and he cried bitter tears about the fact that there are no Talmidei Chachamim. He thought he could list maybe on, a few, 50 Talmidei Chachamim that he knew of at that point. And he said, it's devastating. He says, Torah is drying up. And he cried. He couldn't even catch his breath. He was so consumed by the Ovdan HaTorah. And then Rav Chaim Oizer got up. And Rav Chaim Oizer also, not an hour, but for like a half hour, he cried about the Torah. And he said, we're losing it. It's slipping through our fingers. He spoke with a tremendous amount of maybe sadness and anxiety. And the last speaker was Gedolei Ador. The last speaker was Reb Shimon Shkop. This was eventually going to be Reb Zelig's grandfather. And he pounded his hand on the table. He was a mild-mannered person, and he started yelling. He says, "Was unser nafkamina? The Torah is drying up. It's true, but there's a haftacha. It says clearly in the Torah, Ki lo yisishakach mipizaroi. It's the Rebbeinu Shleilem's business. He's going to make sure that the Torah is not forgotten. It's his job, it's his business, it's his people, it's his commitment. It's not our problem. We have to learn." And what looked like a very devastating Knesset ended up being quite exhilarating to the people present. Reb Zelig said, I walked out very lifted. Somebody gave hope. There's a Rebbeinu Shleilem that's going to help. He says, after the war, he says, I got a job in Montreal. He says, the Rav there allowed me to teach some older Talmidim, and I was teaching them Psukim and Chumash. He says, they weren't shaykh to anything. He says, I realized that Reb Chaim Oizer was right and Reb Baruch Ber was right. And Reb Shimon, he says, I don't know. It's not so pashut. He says, now, I'm sitting here in our Shraga and I'm looking at young kids, a 13, a 14-year-old, and he says, they're making siyumim. He says, the Zayde, now I could call him the Zayde. The Zayde stark gewen gerecht. So, Rabbi Horowitz is going to talk about the devastating problem that is and comes when our icons are broken and our leaders falter. And things happen that make us question. But I just want to share one, I would say, hopeful and very upbeat note. That the same haftacha of Ki lo tishokach conceptually talks to the resilience of Klal Yisrael, the resilience of children, the resilience of parents, the bounce back that we're able to hopefully count on has never let us down. And true, the problem is the problem. And true, the ideas are valid and need to be spoken about. But also true is that Ki lo tishokach is a tremendous haftacha. It's a haftacha keilelis. It's a haftacha in all areas that we're going to maintain our status as being the Am HaNivchar, and we're going to have this durability which has stood us in very good faith since Matan Torah. Thank you.
I have the pleasure and kavod of introducing Rabbi Horowitz. I maybe all of you saw the flyer, and many of you are here because you know who he is. And I could talk about all of his milas for a long time, but that would take away the precious time that we have. He's a Talmid Chacham. He's a doer. He's accomplished a tremendous number of things. He's an author, a mechaber, a chassidish yid with varmkeit, tremendous warmth, and I've had the pleasure of spending psachim with him and other occasions. And he does a lot, and he is a person of great accomplishments. But to me, perhaps his most important trait, which is relevant tonight, is his tremendous courage. He's a man of great fortitude, of great bravery, because to do what he does, tonight he's just going to speak. I assume that maybe he doesn't need the courage to face this wonderful audience, which is here because they like him and they respect him. But he also faces down and faces up to people that are dangerous, people that have threatened him and his family, whom I got to know a little bit, the wonderful, beautiful mishpacha, Kanai Nahara. And that's something that you don't find very often, people with character and personality and knowledge, and also the fortitude and the courage to stand up for what's right, no matter what the consequences might be. And that's another good reason to listen to him tonight. So I want to share a little of art. I was very inspired by what Rabbi Plutchok said. The Gemara tells us in Shabbos, Daf Kuf Yotes, that we all say this pasuk, Al tigu b'meshichai v'nvi'ai al toreyu. So the Gemara says, Al tigu b'meshichai, don't touch my meshichim. Who are the meshichim? Our little meshichim. Elu tinoikes shel beis rabban. These are the little children that learn Torah. Al tigu b'meshichai, don't touch them. I don't know what Rabbi Horowitz is going to say either. But I believe that the theme of tonight is, don't touch our children. Leave them alone. They're precious. And the Gemara goes on to say that there were two Amoraim that were talking, and they were saying that Ilmale, if it wasn't for Tininoika Shabes Rabban, we wouldn't be able to survive. So Amalem Abaya said to them, but what is about with me and you? What is with us? Are we nothing? And Abaya answered, that was what Abaya said, and they answered, because these are Hevel Piyam Shal Tinoika Shal Beis Rabban, that their air is pure, their breathing is pure, their souls are pure, they're the Heilige Neshamas that can save Klal Yisrael. So that's what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about not just doing something that's right, not just doing something for the children, but al tigu b'meshichai, don't touch our little meshichim. And the Maharal says that why are they meshichim? The Maharal says, Rashi says, because Mashiach means a person that uses the oil, the Shemen HaMishcha. So you rub a child with oil, and Mashiach is also rubbed with oil. One of the Mefarshim says that because the Klei HaMikdash, we've been learning about the Mishkan, and we're going to be learning about it again for another couple of weeks, because the Klei HaMishkan, they were anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha. And a child is a Kli Kodesh. A child is vessels of holiness, every one of the children. And therefore, what we're talking about over here is the future. Rabbi Plutchok was talking about the future of Klal Yisrael, what all the Gedolei Yisrael said. But I can tell you from this Gemara that the ones that are really the arbiters of the future of Klal Yisrael, the promise keepers of the future of Klal Yisrael, those are our precious little children. We have to know who they are. They're the future Mashiachim. One of them might be Mashiach. but certainly the Meshichim al tigu b'mshichai, not to let anybody touch them that shouldn't be touching them. That's another pshat in the pasuk. And that's why we're here tonight, I'm sure, for our own children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and all the future dairas. And that's something that I think is very, very well and important for all of us to be dedicated to tonight. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, my Rabbi say, it's a great covet to present to you Rabbi Yaakov Horowitz Shlita.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Feitman, Rabbi Plutchok. I also want to thank Chaim. Where's Chaim? Thank you very much, Chaim, and your two wonderful assistants here. I travel quite a bit. I rarely got such white glove service as here. The guys, well, where are they still here? Thank them for me, please. Okay, I'm going to be presenting, and I'm going to for about 40 minutes, and then I'm going to take some questions. The topic is trust and open communication, and we called it Child Safety 2.0, and I'm going to explain what I meant by this. And that is that this is the classical, basically the headlines of a child safety education. And this is Child Safety 2.0. And I found that in the literature about what I call 1.0, the regular classic messages that we give our children that are so important, it's almost a given that our kids are going to talk to us. You know, like they tell you, sure, no secrets from parents, no secrets from parents. Make sure your kids speak to you on a regular basis, and you'll be able to talk to them. Fact of the matter is, certainly adolescence would be a challenge, but by its very nature, these types of conversations are uncomfortable. And we're going to go through some research later and to explain to you what it is, what are the barriers to open communication. And I'm going to expand the conversation also to include just general parenting and what you could do to keep that relationship open with your children so that they can tell you anything. And then, like I said, I'm going to be opening up for Q&A later. So the 1.0, by the way, I'm not saying this because I'm here, but your community, the Five Towns Far Rockaway community, has been cutting edge for decades now. Whether it was the Kahal program, where the schools worked together to take care of kids who needed some individual attention in school, or meeting on communal issues, on so many different issues. This was probably one of the first communities that instituted child safety education across the board. And kol hakavod to the Rabbanim and the heads of school for doing this. So I'll go through briefly. Basically, we teach our children, and thank you again for the donors who distributed our child safety book that we published together with Art Scroll. It's a little over 10 years, and Baruch Hashem, we're in over 120,000 homes with our Baruch Shalom, this Yata Dishmaya in 3 languages. And parenthetically, one of the things that we worked on when we did the book was that it should not be intimidating. Quite to the contrary, you only see pleasant, smiling faces, and nothing there that produces any fear. The research shows that when we frighten children, anyone, adults as well, when we frighten people, it inhibits their ability to remember things. You can study, you can look up Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm going to say a few things and say you can look them up. Ladies and gentlemen, I was an 8th grade Rebbe for 15 years before I started my yeshiva, so I'm very used to people looking under their desk for things. They didn't have smartphones at the time, but feel free to look it up if you want to while I'm talking. It won't disturb me at all. So one of the things that we know is that Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs explains why that's the case. So therefore, we're not supposed to be, when we speak to our children, it's really important that we have a moderate amount of anxiety. When Dr. David Pelkowitz, who was kind enough to look over every word and every image of that book, he said that an anxiety level of 2 to 3 out of 10 is about right. Not, enough to say that it's important, but not to frighten the children. And that's why I never tell any scary stuff, any stories during presentations that'll unsettle people. It's literally counterproductive. So the first, excuse me, please. The first message is no secrets from parents, to train children that that's something that's just a red line. Nobody's ever allowed to tell them to keep a secret from you parents. And it's something you ingrain into the children. It's a very big red flag. There's no reason that anybody should ever do that. I was a school principal and a Rebbe. There's just no reason in this world that I should tell a child to keep a secret from parents. And later on, when we talk about communication, I'll show you why that's not only this piece, but it's an integral part of the whole package. Your body belongs to you is the notion of personal space. It's something we can teach very young children. Think of how old a child has to be to realize that something belongs to him or her. Just try yanking away a blankie or something else, a pacifier, or something children like. They have this concept at a very young age. And it's not only your body. The research shows that when if children have this notion of personal space, one of the studies actually compared children, meaning that if they had the same experience, the same upbringing, but one of them had a private drawer at home, and kids knocked, and the culture was that the kids knocked when they went into a room, that when we teach children that this notion of privacy, they're more likely to defend themselves if someone invades their personal space, even a small thing like that, of having their own space, because they can extrapolate that if this is mine and that's mine. If you see in the book, we have the kids, have a ball or other things that belong to them, so they belong to them. That's the big idea, to teach them this notion of personal space. Good touching, bad touching. Some touching is okay, some is not. A nice tsanua way of saying this, you can tell children that no one's supposed to touch them in a spot covered by a bathing suit. That's appropriate for boys and girls and pretty much captures what we need to tell them. The experts say that we should be very precise with our language when we do exceptions with younger children, because especially with young children, there are people who have to touch them in private spaces to bathe them or to soil themselves. So you can't give a blanket saying nobody's allowed to touch you. You say except for. So the experts say we should not say except for people in our family. We know, unfortunately, it's really hard to get our head around it, but a very large percentage of abusers are from that inner circle of family or close friends or people that they know well. So to be extremely precise with the language, that no one should be touching you in a private space. You shouldn't touch anyone else. No one's allowed should be looking at your private space. You shouldn't, you shouldn't be looking at anyone else, except for, and then you very precise. As a doctor, when one of us is in the room, when Bobby comes over, Sapta, whatever, when they're bathing you, a teacher, but really precise and limited only to that. Okay, and the fourth is, it's a little more difficult. The first three are pretty simple. They're straightforward. The fourth is no one has the right to make you feel uncomfortable. And what we're really teaching the children is to trust their instincts. And if they feel uncomfortable, they can get out, and that we, as their parents, will support their right to do so. That's really important, because often the kids come back and they say, I was talking to someone, again, someone they respect, someone in your family, could be an uncle, could be, someone, one of your close friends, and he said, well, he made me uncomfortable, and I left. He said, whoa, what did he do? Okay, and it's important to understand that the kids always don't have the language to explain why they're feeling uncomfortable. If you have any questions, I want to get through the presentation, so if you have any questions to follow up on this during Q&A, I'll be glad to explain it in greater depth. But the big idea is to teach the children to follow their instincts. So in other words, the children, some of these things are hard to define. You can't exactly explain why you feel uncomfortable, you just do. So, for example, let's say someone, look at the spacing here, okay? So some of you are sitting, just a foot or two away from the next person. So if someone came by, if a child came home and said, someone sat right next to me and it bugged me out, how close was he? The child might not be able to articulate that it was an empty room. And there were imagine if there were two people in the room and someone sat right next to you like this. You'd get bugged out. you might not have the language, or somebody put a hand on a shoulder. So you say, did he touch you in a private place? No, I put a hand on the shoulder. Oh, Baruch Hashem was nothing. The child might need that. Why do you feel uncomfortable? And they might not be able to tell you that the hand was there for a minute and a half, or he got a look that made him uncomfortable. I'm going to talk about the grooming process later, okay? But this is the bulk of the presentation, is going to be about trust and open communication. And I'm really going to challenge you to think about the answer to this question: would your children tell you? Would your kids tell you about an uncomfortable thing? And it doesn't have to be necessarily abuse-related. Would a child tell you if they got into trouble and would they be comfortable talking it over with you? And I'm really going to be spending time on it because I think it's extremely important. And part of that 2.0 is expanding the conversation, besides for what we spoke about before, but to learn grooming, halo effect, just world theory. I just picked 3. There are many others. These are 3 grooming we're more familiar with, to understand it better and to be able to factor that in when and if there's an accusation or something's going on. In the case of Chaim Wilder, it's the halo effect certainly had a lot to do with it, and I'll explain it. And it's extraordinarily powerful. A little bit later in the presentation, I'm going to be going through these 3 things. Okay? So here's the thought. The big idea about this child safety, and what's important to understand is that when I started working in this space almost 20 years ago, if you would have told me 35 years ago that I'd be dealing with all of this stuff, whatever, but it was there, and I just had to learn it really fast once I realized that so many kids were being abused. So I was very skeptical, like, how do you stop this? So I spoke to experts in the field. I said, how do you stop? How could you train a young child to protect themselves against an adult who wants to take advantage of them? And it was very perplexing to me. People said, yeah, it works. Here's the research. I said, explain it to me. Research I respect deeply, as you'll see, but, Lashon B'nai Adam, explain to me in English, how does this work? How can you, and besides the fact, most parents, the kids don't listen while we're talking to them, right? Don't fight with your sister. 2 minutes later, they're doing it. Now you expect them to remember something a year later that's going to magically defend them. So it's really important that we understand this. Think about a swindler, someone who wants to pull a scam. They're most comfortable looking for a mark, it's called, someone that they can take advantage of, someone who's naive about finances and socially isolated, without family. Those are the 2, basically, if you had to describe the 2 attributes, a swindler's dream would be someone who has these 2 attributes. They're naive about finances and they're isolated. Now, that means if someone is selling some phony thing in Israel, if you put down 50%, you'll get a huge discount. I'm putting up a new development. It's not true, let's say, okay? So they're going to ask, they're not going to go right away with the paper and ask for a deposit with the contract, because they don't know who they're talking to. What happens if this person's child is or a sibling or a parent is an attorney or an accountant or so real estate, or someone who does the same thing, just not swindling them. So they're looking for people who are naive and people who are isolated. They need both, because even if this person is naive, you don't know who they know. And abusers do exactly that. That's exactly what the grooming process is about, that they look, Rahman al-Islam, they look for children who have not been trained in child safety education and are isolated. And that's why the trust is so important, because if you could be in the middle of a large family, but if you feel that your parents are not safe to speak to, meaning you'll get a look or they'll be upset or you'll disappoint them, we'll talk about that later. Excuse me, please. So they could be isolated in a crowd. So that's why this is so important. And they go through this process of, look, I'm going to show you something later that's going to explain this. And this in plain view, I'm going to list some resources over the the course of the presentation, it's my number one recommendation to parents to read about and understanding the grooming process. And it's a piece called In Plain View. It's, I believe, in New Yorker magazine about 10 years ago. This is Malcolm Gladwell, the guy who wrote Tipping Point and Blink and Outlier. He's a goin, he's a genius in explaining things that anybody can understand, and he really explains it well. I'm going to go over some points, some components of this. So here's some case study. Here's some things. Lettering's a little small. So I'm just picking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here we go. A high school bacher. All these things were things that parents spoke to me about. Okay. A high school bacher is having a crisis of faith. I really don't believe what they're teaching us in yeshiva, what they're learning with us. When I first started Project Yes in 1997, a very Haredi father in Flatbush called me and told me he was devastated. His 17-year-old son came home and told him, and his son was a Mitzuyan, Aleph plus, everything. And he said, look, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving religion, but I don't believe this Kriyas Yamsuf and this. Maybe it was a mashal, maybe not. And the father called me and asked me what to tell his child. So I told him, I said, listen, Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky Shlita just started with a Paisik. He's been for the last 23 years. Baruch Hashem, he should be Marach Yom B'Shanim. So I said, I'm going to go upstairs with that one. But I wrote down a few things that I thought Rav Shmuel might say. And but parenthetically, just so you know as parents, I'll tell you what he said in a second, but I told the father, before I hang up with you, I want you to know you're an amazing father because he told you. Knowing, and he said he's a great kid, knowing that you'd be devastated, but he figured you'd be happier knowing about it than not knowing about it. I said, you're a great father, you really are, and I want to talk to you about it later, how you did this. I always look for best practices, okay? So the Rabbi Shmuel said, by the way, I'm telling you, I was shocked. Rabbi Shmuel said the father should tell the son that David HaMelech says, Yimesh Naseinu Behem Shivim Shana, we're here in this world for 70 years, 80 years, we say it in davening Friday night. So he says, Rabbi Shmuel says, what's that about? So he says that we're here for a journey to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to a God that we can't see. So we have 70, 80 years to get it, to figure it out. So the father should tell his son, you're 17, you have 53 years to go. No jokes. He said, let's talk about it. If you have any questions, come talk about it. And that he shouldn't make him feel like folks would have told me when I was in yeshiva if I had asked then. And he just said, tell him, okay, you're exploring. You're supposed to ask. It's a compliment that you care enough to ask. Boom. Rav Shmuel didn't say the compliment part. I'm very precise. Okay, but that's just one. So a young man is being groomed or abused. Are they comfortable talking to parents? All but 2 boys in my class are vaping. A few parents mentioned this to me, recently, over the last couple of years. The kids came home and told the parents, look, I'm not doing it yet, but everybody else is. Would they be comfortable having this conversation? This was Nebuch from an abuse victim, a survivor, a kid. He said, how can I concentrate on what anyone, Rebbe, parents, are talking about when I have an 800-pound weight on my back? Nebuch, I heard this firsthand from a child, a teenager who's an abuse survivor, and he told me, the parents sent him to me because he was having difficulty. It was a young man. And he said, everybody's talking to me about getting better and stopping, not fighting with people and whatever they do better in school. He said, I have an 800-pound weight on my back. I don't want to talk about anything else. I'm not interested in anything else. That's what I want to talk about. So I said, why don't you talk to your parents? He said, oh, come on. Okay? And I like many parts of Yiddishkeit, but I'm not giving up my phone. So that's really the question. Would you be comfortable? Would your children be comfortable? A tough question. I'm sorry I'm challenging you. I won't frighten you, but I'll challenge you sometimes. Would your children tell you one of those 5? Would they be comfortable sitting down and saying, Mom, Dad, Abba, Ima, Mami, Tati? Something I want to talk to you about. By the way, I think it's one of the nicest things that children can tell you on the way out of the house. When they grow up and they go off to Eretz Yisrael, Baruch Hashem, Yizaycha, to walk into the chuppah, I think it's one of the nicest things that the kids can tell a parent is I was able to talk to you about anything. So this is what you see, the 90% of an iceberg is underwater. You only see that top stuff unless they can confide in you, which is really means, the etzem, what it really boils down to, is that if they cannot talk to you about these 5, which is down there in the 90%, you're not able to parent them in the thing they need most. That's frightening thing, the 800-pounder, but even in a less frightening thing. If they can't talk to you, you can't parent them. Think about it. If they can't discuss this with you openly, how can you parent them? And what do they need parenting most about? This. Okay? So let's let Rav Shimon Schwab said that the first time the word friend is used in the Torah is by the story of Yehuda and Tamar. It says that Yehuda was, he was in a bad position at the time, and he was embarrassed, and it says that he trusted Re'ehu ha'adulami, his friend. And Rav Schwab said, a friend is someone that you can talk to about anything. And that footnote is not Rav Schwab's, that's mine. Parenthetically, it wasn't a family member. It wasn't a family member. Why? Because it's easier not to talk to a family member. So we have a challenge that family members are, by its very definition, harder to speak to. Okay? So this is, if you want to go out, this is just Yankee Horowitz, this is not research. I'm just making a suggestion that you might want to set this as a goal for your family, to think about it, something to discuss. If you're married, talk it over with your spouse. If you're a single parent, really think about it. Is this a goal that you want to have? I'm a very big believer in trying to articulate goals for things like this. I'll talk to you about some resources later that I gave some classes on this goal-setting idea, that our home will be a place where our teens and tweens can talk to us about anything. And the experts in goal-setting and, improving our lives and all of that say that this is a format for how to articulate a goal. Talk about it in an action form, not I want to, but our home will be fill in the blank. I picked one about having open communication because list why it's important to you, and what are you doing about it? If you have just the first two, it's a pipe dream. When you talk about what you go, this is what the experts say. There happens to be a fellow, if you're interested, a guy named Robert Keegan, a Harvard professor, wrote a fantastic book called Immunity to Change, if you're interested. I did not put it down here in the resources. He actually adds a fourth component. I had the privilege of listening to him when Avichai sponsored a few of us to go to the Harvard Principles Program. But this is the way they tell you to do it. And I'm going to walk you through a sample of this, of what this looks like when you go through this goal-setting process. And I picked something not related to child safety, okay? So our home will be, nobody should tell you what goals you should have at home, but this is another possible goal. Our home will be a place where our tweens and teens feel comfortable hanging out in. We want our home to be a place that the kids are comfortable, they're comfortable bringing their friends over, and they're just like hanging out at home. Again, so the experts would say, tell me why. Why? Because we'll be able to parent them better. We'll know who their friends are. We'd rather not worry where they are. We don't want them getting into trouble. Okay? Therefore, what are we doing about it? And I think, again, this is literature on this. This part is Yankee. I think this part is very important. When you set a goal, you got to be honest with yourself and say, what's it going to cost me? Nothing good in life comes, you have a goal, it's going to cost you something. So what's it going to cost you? You say, I want to have the type of home where our children are hanging out in. Why? Because, good reasons, right? Because we want to be able to parent them. Obviously, we're going to extrapolate this to this goal of having your children talk to you. That's the idea. I want to use this as a practice so that we can speak a common language when we talk about the next part. Okay? So these are the reasons that you have. What's it going to cost you to have that type of home? Okay? So having a home where teens and tweens feel comfortable hanging out will cost money, and a lot of money. Why? Because you're going to have to feed them and their friends, right? You're going to have to feed them. Having sent our boys and girls to Eretz Yisrael, right? You take your daughter out with 4 friends. They split 2 salads. You take the boys out. They eat 12 steaks. But be that as it may, whatever it is, it's a salad or steak. They both cost money. Come up with some other ones, please. Feel free. If you want to have them comfortable, hang out in your house, it's going to cost you money. What else is it going to cost you? Go ahead. Sorry. Space, noise, peace and quiet. It's going to cost you menucha. It's going to cost you space, right? All of a sudden, the house shrunk because these large creatures are occupying significant percentages of your real estate at home. What else? Go ahead. Cleanliness, right? Let's talk about the cost, right? It's going to cost you cleanliness. It's going to cost you menucha. Your tranquility is going to go out the door. It'll cost you privacy. It's a big deal. Now, like I said, I didn't see this in the literature, but I'm a very pragmatic person. So if you can't figure out the cost, how could you say, of course, give me one of each? That sounds like a good goal. So you say, sure, I like that. Hey, Horowitz, I like that. Nice idea. Good. I want my kids to be comfortable hanging out. I want my kids to be comfortable talking to me. It's what it's going to cost you. Are you ready to do it? That should be part of the equation. If I were writing a book, I would put it in there. Say, I'm willing to pay, what do you say, messiness, cleanliness, right? Cleanliness, I'm willing to pay money, I'm willing to give up some menuchas and nefesh because it's important to me. That's something I just encourage you to consider. Why? Because of this. Not him hanging out at home. This notion of having what I really want to talk to you about tonight is the idea of having children be comfortable talking to you. And there are so many reasons for it. This was a picture I took near Aspen. I went out to go skiing. I'm sorry, it's summertime actually. I went skiing there also, but this is called a runaway truck ramp. And what they do is when a truck is out of control, the brakes aren't big enough to stop the truck. So that's why they always say no more than 20 miles an hour when they're going down a hill, because they have to put it into lower gear, or the brakes just rub out right away. The friction just destroys them right away, and they literally get killed, chas v'shalom, and they kill lots of people. The truck, imagine going down this hill. So they have this runaway ramp, so that the truck just goes up that, and it expends the energy that it had. And they actually have soft gravel there and little bumps on the way, so that it's safely. That's what it's like when you can talk to your child. You're giving them one of these when their life is a little bit out of control. That's another one of the reasons that this is helpful. I spoke for about 20 years. I've been begging parents not to ply children with alcohol. And then it hit me 2 years ago. Some folks thought I got soft in my old age, but it really was congruent with what I was saying. I started the article I wrote for the past 20 years. I've been pleading with parents not to. So I said, but my suggestion is that every parent should tell their child before they leave the house, if you're in trouble, call us. We will pick you up. We won't say a word for 48 hours. We are giving you a no questions asked pickup. Why? Anybody? I'm sorry? They'll call you, and they will say you might be saving their life. And what happens in the real world is that the kids get drunk. They know that we're going to be upset with them, or worse. They're going to be grounded until they're 80, whatever we say when we're in these moods. So they get into more trouble. They can't come home. They have 5 hours that they have to sleep it off. Where do you think they're going? They're not going to the Beis Medrash then. They're either sleeping on someone's lawn, they're going home with somebody who's also drunk, and they're going to come home 4 a.m. So that was my suggestion. No questions asked, pick up. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it, but we'll have a conversation. Okay? And this is what I ended the article with these words. Your life matters more than our rules. That's really what we're telling the children. Your life is more important than my rules or our rules. Okay, so that's just another way of thinking about this notion of having this type of conversation with your children where you can, where you give them the license. That doesn't mean, here you go, hold it. Do teens really talk to their parents? Does that mean it's okay? Do you know consequences? How will they ever learn right from wrong? Every one of these is a good question. My grandmother used to say, the kasha is besavi de teretz. Sometimes the question is better than the answer. These are all at least as good as the answers I'll try to give. But we'll do this during Q&A because these are really important. If you haven't, most of us, we parent the way we were parented, and most of us were not raised in a home where they said, I'll give you a free pickup. no questions asked pickup. Zwei fraskas, like, right? So that wasn't part of the vernacular. Our parents didn't get, I'm 62 years old, but, so I have a few years on some of you, but my generation didn't do timeouts, folks. This was a timeout, okay? So we'll talk about this, okay? So again, if you want to mentor your children, this is something that I've been talking about a lot lately and thinking about, the notion of mentoring your children, of being a mentor, because I had some mentors that were extraordinary, that really impacted my life very much. And a mentor is someone that you go out to talk to them, hoping to get their advice. And mentoring, I tell parents, you want to be a mentor or a supervisor? You want to supervise your kids, or you want to mentor them? Two very different things. I'm going to show you links later. I started, June 1st, I started doing under a minute parenting clips. I hope one or two of you may have seen them. There's a number of different ways you can get them. I have an Instagram at Yaakov Horowitz. You can WhatsApp. I'll put up the number a little bit later to get them free to your phone every day, or you can get it by email, or it's on Vimeo. We purposely put it on Vimeo because if you Vimeo Bright Beginnings Forum, it'll come up. We have about 220 clips already, but I went through thematically, week by week, different skill sets that I felt were important before adolescence. I started adolescence now, January 2nd. And I was building to this with many skills. We do one topic a week, a new topic every week, so there's 6 of each subject. I actually did 2 weeks on finding a mentor, which I believe parents really need, or is a credible value to find someone, a Rav, a Rebbetzin, an older person, to help you, especially if you're a young parent, guide you through life. But then I did another 2 weeks on mentoring your children and what that looks like. It was very powerful when I thought about it, so I hope you find it helpful as well. I'll give you some places to look it up if you want. So our home will be a place, this is the nusach, okay? Our home will be a place where tweens and teens can talk to us about anything. Why? It'll make our relationship more meaningful. It'll help their personal safety. It's the only way we can guide or mentor them through their mistakes, okay? Therefore, I will overcome the barriers that make kids stop talking to their parents. And before we get to the research, this is Pirush Yankee. So this is just Lashon B'nai Adam, okay? Why would kids not want to talk to their parents? So they don't want to talk to their parents because they're afraid of getting punished. They don't want to talk to their parents. But talking doesn't mean, I heard a nice Dvar Torah, okay? Talking means like that kid, the 17-year-old who came home and said he doesn't believe in what they're teaching him in yeshiva, or someone who's vaping, wants to start vaping, okay? So I won't want to talk to my parents because I'm embarrassed. Great. You'll disappoint them, right? So we don't always think of that, right? I don't want to disappoint you. Go ahead. Anybody else? Fear of judgment. You're going to give me that look, right? You're going to give me that look, and from now on, anything that happens, you're going to say, that's what he was talking, right? Okay, you're going to give me that look. You're going to judge me anymore? By the way, those are pretty steep barriers as it is. Anybody else?
They don't get it.
They don't get it? Very good. They don't get it. I promise you I wouldn't embarrass you, right? Okay, this is my very chashuv brother, Rabbi Yehuda. I'm sorry, I said I wouldn't do it. Rabbi Yehuda is my younger brother. I always say that I have better yichus than he does because I have him for a brother. Anyway, okay, so they don't get it. If you think, I told them I wouldn't do it, but once I said that I had it, I'm sorry. So, communication. Okay, so we have 4 already. Anybody else? Sorry? You're right. They're not going to trust you anymore. Anytime I leave the house now, right? Confidentiality, we got 6. Are you going to tell your friends about this? And now I'm never going to be able to go back to school again. So we got big ones. These are big ones. So it was nice to come up. That's why I think this cost is so important. Nice to come up with this goal, but hey, pal, what are you paying? What's it going to cost you? Baruch Hashem, nothing. I got it. You don't got it. It's going to cost you. Okay? So these are the barriers. And what's the cost? Okay? So let's stop for a minute and think about how we overcome these barriers. And in baseball, if you do 1 out of 3, or here 2 out of 6, you'd be making a few $1 million, many millions of dollars a year for batting .333. Here, if you get 5 out of 6, they're still not going to talk to you. If you cover everything but confidentiality, they're still not going to talk to you. If you're going to punish them and you do everything else right, they're still not going to, they might not talk to you. Confidentiality probably is perhaps the worst. If you don't get it, one of the women said they're disappointed, they don't want to disappoint you. I still have this image in front of me. I actually, folks, when I started Project Yes, I actually interviewed 105 yeshiva boys over the course of a summer. I was up in camp, and I was in Camp Re'im, and I said I have subjects all around me. So I wrote up a question. It wasn't a survey. It was it wasn't a study. It was just a question, a survey, So I asked them a number of questions. I said, what do you think the 5 biggest challenges are? What advice would you give? Some of the things that people, if a kid said a child doesn't want to daven, what advice would you give the parents? If a child has bad friends, quote unquote, what advice would, they were fast. It was fascinating, by the way, the answers that they gave me. So one of the kids, I said, would you confide in your parents if you were getting into trouble? What, are you kidding me? Like a very small percentage of the kids said yes. And I'll never forget, one of the kids told me, I said that disappointed, who said disappointed? Disappointed is like there's something you wouldn't think of right away. So I remember he said, why should I upset my mother? And this is what he said. That goes to what you said, Rabbi Yehuda. She's such a nice lady. With that tone of voice. I really said it like this. She's such a nice lady. He says, anytime I do something she doesn't like, I promise you, she goes like this. And takes out a Tehillim. I'm sorry, I kid you not. She goes like, and she takes out a Tehillim. He said, why should I bother her? She's a nice lady. Okay, so if you don't get it, what's the point in telling someone who doesn't get it? And you don't want to disappoint her. Okay? So we think about removing them. And again, I'll gladly take during Q&A because there are so many questions. Once you do this, if you're doing it the other way, there's not that many questions. I always say, please forgive me, parents who don't get it, sleep better at night. That's another thing we should put down, right? How's it going? Oh, Baruch Hashem, such nachas, right? Boom. Right? And those who get it are sitting there with your stomach lining is you're losing like little pieces of your small intestine every night because you know what's going on. So that's another barrier, folks. We didn't even talk about that. Are you willing to put up with the chazarai that's involved with the messiness of, okay? So we gotta it's as simple and as complicated as that. I'm gonna do the research next, but think of the barriers. Your kids don't want to be punished. Again, you don't have to do this. You could raise your children in a more, authoritarian way or a different way. But if you want to be authoritative, if you want to be more progressive, and you want to know what's going on in their lives, you're going to have to deal with one of the barriers. So if you punish, I'm not going to punish you for something that I tell you. We'll talk, like the no pickup. I don't want. They're afraid of upsetting us. So you say, look, sweetheart, we're going to be upset. Don't never, ever, ever, ever lie to your kids. Don't check on their, phones when they're not looking. Please tell them that you're going to be supervising. Don't snoop, please. So, because I'm sure I'll get 5 questions on that. Okay, so that's another component. So don't lie to them and say, I'm not going to be disappointed. Of course you can be disappointed. Something my wife and I always told our kids, Shefila, we want to know, even if it's going to upset us, we want to be part of your life. We want you to feel close to us. You can talk to us about anything. And they'll test you out. And I can guarantee you, if you haven't done this yet, the first thing they tell you is not what they really want to talk to you about. There are a few things in life that I'm sure of. This is one of them. They're going to come over to you. They're not going to tell you what they really want to talk about. They're going to say, I forgot to make a bracha achrayna on this thing. What should I do? You say, it's such a good shayla. Let's go to the Rav, right? That's not what they want to talk to you about. They're testing you to see how you're going to respond, okay? Confidentiality is an issue, so you tell them. We won't tell unless someone's life is in danger. I'll tell you something. My wife Udi and I, we actually told our children that we sat down with the kids when they hit a certain age. We said, look, you can tell one of us and ask us, we know, as Mommy and I don't keep secrets from each other, but you can tell one of us and ask us not to tell the other, and we won't. We give you our word that we won't. And so many times they did that over the years. And there was almost a pattern, like the certain things they told me about, something you need a strong stomach lining for, because what I hear every day, oh, it's only a little, so I would react probably less, get less, at least visibly upset about it. And a lot of relationship things and other stuff that my wife is amazing at, they went to her for, and we really, can't lie to kids, we really kept that. Okay, so work your way through those barriers and just think about it. You want to get it, you got to get it, and this is part of it. But keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, learn, read, study, talk. You want to know what's going on? If you're checking out schools in Israel, folks, again, when you listen to people for 25 years and you really respect them and you listen carefully, you learn an awful lot. One of the mothers came back from Israel. She said, we checked out seminaries for our daughter. So she said, what we did? We went around to a bunch of people asking, and then we said, what the heck? We just asked all the cab drivers we got in. Is that genius? Is that brilliant? Every cab we got into, we said, what's the best supervision school around here? Oh, so they pay us an extra 300 shekel, get us there before 12 o'clock. And he says, this one and this one and that one. Well, we bring kids there 5 in the morning. Nobody cares. So that's a good idea. You want to get it? Figure out stuff like this. If you don't know, ask your 21-year-old. Not yours, somebody else's probably. But just work your way through these. I'm going to go through some research on this. These are actual studies. I'm going to give Reb Chaim, I'll be glad to give you the PowerPoint if anybody wants, or has questions or whatever wants to learn. Okay, so here's some research. On the left side, it says, in the black ink, it says, not Loshem B'nei Adam. On the right side is layman's term. Teens open when they trust their parents, when they feel obligated to share. These are all studies. In the bottom, you can see because the parents have made them feel that way, and when they feel accepted. By the way, this fits everything we were talking about. That's why I said the first stuff is Yankees. This is just research-based, which is important. It gets us to know that this works. Teens behave more safely in families that spend time together. There was a famous study that was done by the CASA, Center for Alcohol and Substance Abuse, that was started, by Joseph Califano, who was a cabinet minister under Ronald Reagan, and he did a study and found that families that had dinner 6 or 7 times together a week, there was virtually no drug use among the kids. Okay, now don't feel guilty if you're working and you have a life and you can't do that. Make up for it over time. Had that be something that you do. Teens open to their parents. When the teens view their parents as being open and good communicators, I didn't bother with the other stuff. I'm doing Loshem B'nei Adam, okay? When the family feels close as a unit, when the teens themselves feel good about relationships with the family members. Teens share more with their parents when they view their parents as being open-minded and flexible. And teens open to their mothers when the mothers validate, understand. You can see when they don't validate and emphasize, basically when they freak out, they're less likely to tell parents who freak out. And this, if you look at this circle of adolescent disclosure, again, this is not, we just put together, but would your kids tell you, this is what research shows, that if there's no freaking out, if there's openness, relationships, flexibility, you spend time as a family, there's trust. That's why I said don't snoop on your kids, because once you break trust, very hard to get it back again, no matter what you think you're doing it for. And there's actually some research on children who disclose child abuse to their parents. They did a study on 26 adolescents. This was fascinating. Most people to whom abuse was disclosed were the adolescents' peers. They were more comfortable telling their siblings than they were telling their parents, which is, I guess, understandable to a degree. They didn't trust their parents to be decisive and not burden the parent, right? Not to upset them. So this is what we need to do. Major implications is strengthen your relationship. And also it says tell your other kids to do what happens if somebody discloses to them. Study after study, there are patterns. They're afraid of negative reactions. Sometimes, with God forbid, they feel responsible for the abuse. Sometimes, it's complicated, but that's, or abusers within a family, which we know is extraordinarily challenging. Let me go through this quickly, and then I'll take some questions. This is an article called In Plain View. I mentioned it earlier by Gladwell, and it's about the grooming process. And he masterfully explained how this works. Whoa, a mind of its own. Okay, so I don't know if you can even read the text. Again, I'll provide it. I'll give Chaim the PowerPoint. You can feel free to ask him for it. I'd rather you just don't give it out wholesale, but if anybody asks you for it, feel free to, please. Here's the story that he wrote the article about, Gladwell wrote the article about Penn State. There was a guy named Joseph Paterno who was the coach there. By all accounts, a wonderful human being who cared about the athletes. He was worshipped there. They had a huge statue of him in Penn State. And they found out that a guy named Sandusky was abusing kids for 30 years, right under Paterno. And there's a lot of learning that we could do from this. They call it grooming. Many molesters said they would spend from 2 to 3 years getting established in a new community before molesting a child. And by the way, that fits what we said at the beginning, that a scammer doesn't go and give you that contract right away, because they don't know. They want to get comfortable. It's frightening. He did a study on a guy named Clay, who was in elementary school. Listen to this. He began by asking, he was a coach. He asked the kids, do you want to stay, can we stay late after school? The kids, after practice, the kids who said, I have to call my parents, he didn't bother. And then he would touch the kids on their back, and if they didn't object, they would touch them under their shirt, not in a private space. And if the parents would call, he would say, well, I was checking for chickenpox because we had an outbreak. And the parents who called, he would never touch their kids because he was looking for the isolation nebuch. And it's so sad that isolated kids nebuch are in such a high-risk category. This is just fascinating. One of the things that it says, by the way, is that Paterno needed a guy like Sandusky because you think about leaders of schools who are great people and great tzaddikim, and there's such a pattern. It says Paterno, all he wanted to do was talk football. He didn't want to be busy. He loved to play football. He was talking about plays, so he outsourced stuff to Sandusky. It's fascinating, Rabbi Feitman, that the parallel, that the heads of the yeshiva want to learn. They want to give shiur. And sometimes, therefore, people can get away with it. Not that there's anything wrong with giving shiur. It's great. But I'm saying sometimes we turn a blind eye when folks do this. 2 more things quickly. I'll take questions. I believe we need to vacate here at 10 to 8, I believe. It's 7:50. 10 to 9, I'm sorry, right. That would have been a fast speech. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take questions here, and if anybody wants to continue, or as my kids say, if you don't have a life, you can come downstairs, and we'll find another room. Chaim said he arranged to have another room. I'll be glad to take questions for as long as I can stand, okay? So I'm sure you have a lot. I hope you have a lot. So let's talk about the halo effect. I said at the beginning, remember we said at the beginning that there were some things I wanted, grooming, we just spoke about, and I want you to, I really encourage you to get that article. Like I said, 8th grade Rebbe, do it now. So the halo effect is just a fascinating concept, and that is that we prejudge people, and once we make a judgment on people, it colors the way we think about it later. There are hundreds of variations of this. The original research was done in the Army, and they found that people who were handsome or attractive, well-dressed, put together, got better grades from the sergeants. Because you just assume that someone who dresses well has it all together. So we make an assumption. Here's example I give. I didn't see this in the literature. Okay? You're the second person in shul tomorrow morning. Davening starts at 6, you come 10 to 6. You see a guy standing by the bima with his hand in a pushka box taking money out. Do you call the cops? Depends who it is. Right? The action is suspicious, but there's a halo effect. You know this person, can't be. So you say, oh, he probably put a 20 and he's taking singles out. If it's somebody that looks suspicious, you call the cops right away. So the action is the same. The halo effect stops you when you analyze folks like Walder and you see some of these attributes. I'll do the next one, the theory of the just world. It is so powerful. I'll give you another example. Just think about it. Imagine you're standing in shul. Think about this, folks. Imagine you have a Bal Kriya, a Bal Korah, whatever, Dikduk or not, okay? Somebody's been laning for 30 years, never made a mistake. You look in your Chumash, and he makes a bad one day. Are you going to get up and say something? I bet you don't. Because this guy's perfect. He never makes a mistake. And I'm going to make a fool out of myself getting up and screaming, hey, but I just saw. Outscroll got it right. So you'll think my glasses, I don't know, I saw something I didn't hear right. Maybe his grandfather has a different minig. He probably spoke to some gedolim about this and, whatever. You'll think anything in the world rather than get up in public and say something. And that's what happens with guys like Walder. And that's what happens with the guy from Zaka. And that's what happens with other abusers. That they develop a reputation. One of the things, Jerry Sandusky, if you read the piece, he was known to do quirky stuff. He did kooky stuff, and a lot of people, you see this pattern. He would bullwhip people, he's 40, 50 years old. At least he's not old to me, right? I'm saying, but he was a grown man. He was bullwhipping kids. And when he did kooky things, they said, it's just Jerry being Jerry. So he had license to do weird things, like take kids late at night in the morning or shower with boys or do strange things. And people said, it's just Jerry being Jerry. He's a little weird. But he does great work with the kids. So when somebody like Walder, somebody sees him violating yichud or something else or whatever, and you say, hey, whoa, what's going on? You're not going to say anything because it's Chaim Walder. If you're interested, not now, I wrote a piece in the Times of Israel called I Almost Became Walder's Partner. I met Chaim Walder twice, and I almost became his partner. We almost partnered with him on the Hebrew book. And I walked away because I had a bad feeling. I didn't hear anything from anybody. I just walked away. And I wrote, not now, but I wrote a piece. If you look it up, Yaakov Horowitz, Walder, Times of Israel, I wrote that why I thought I didn't have had a bad feeling, because I basically wrote I don't notice details. So I never notice details. May Hashem forgive me, whatever, I just don't. Not good or bad, it's just me. So I didn't notice if he had plaques on the walls. I'm telling you, I absolutely believe that was part of it. I had no reason for walking away. But I think that's also part of it. We should stop looking at stuff and just judge the action by itself. Okay, so that's the halo effect. Just world hypothesis quickly says basically that we want to believe that the world is a fair place. It offends us, it makes us crazy that somebody like that could live for so many years ravaging the lives of little children and wasn't struck by lightning. I'll tell you something fascinating. This is called the just worth. I want you to look up all of this stuff. Become more familiar. The more you know, the more you read, the better equipped you'll be. The more tools you'll have to be able to understand things and cut through this denial. I saw a stunning study that found that people of faith, any religion, have a harder time with the just world syndrome, which makes sense. Because an atheist will say, they were just random. Doesn't it say, the world stinks, it's a lousy place. Doesn't mean, God forbid, that they're not good people. I don't mean it like that. I'm saying, but if you don't believe that there's a din v'dayan, as we say, so, not fair. So religious people have a harder time with this. We have a harder time saying that how could this go on like this? So these are just barriers that we have. This is a list of parenting clips these are the subjects that I spoke about so far this year. Those subjects in yellow are all related to these conversations about how to set goals. Some of them here, how to set goals, consequences against punishments, Ravol, B'Shlomo Volba, planting and building, 4 parenting styles, a lot of stuff on adolescence. So I really think it's free. It's free. You can get it one of 4 ways. You can follow on Instagram. It's at Yaakov Horowitz. WhatsApp, you can 845-540-2414. You can do that now too. Just write subscribe, and you get them every day. You can email and get it. So that's just a resource because it's me. These are some of the things that I spoke about. We're also working on a project. Hashem should give me koyach to be able to see it through. I will not rest till there's a book in every home. We're working really on getting people to give them out at Upsharon, give them out to your friends. sponsor what somebody did tonight to get them in schools. We really want to get a book in every home, and I will not rest until it happens. We're giving it out. I'm partnering with Art Scroll. We did the book together with them. We're giving it for $5 a book for over 100 books, and it's safety at stewardschnee.com, S-T-U-L, Chaim, sorry, Chaim. Just send it over to Chaim, and I'll take your questions, please. Go ahead. Thank you very much for setting up this PowerPoint. Go ahead, folks. I hope you found this helpful. Thank you. I'll take some questions. Feel free, random. And I said, when we get repositioned, I'll be glad to go downstairs. Anyone, please, Chaim, you got to get Kadima. Go ahead.
My question out there, sort of put you on the spot, because when we talk,
That's where we live.
we talked about you're going to discuss what we can do as a community. And it sounds like a lot of the advice that we talked about tonight is to be in contact with your own children, how to see it within your own kids. But what could the school do? What could the community do? These guys are so good at
So since we spoke, I decided I'm doing a between 5 and 10 part series starting this Motzei Shabbos on my Instagram page. It's at Yaakov Horowitz. I'm interviewing some really top people in the field, and we're going to talk about communal issues, about what you could do. I'm starting first, Motzei Shabbos. My topic is abuse is not the same in every community. How's yours? And I know some things I'm going to say might not make me popular in certain places, but I'm 62 years old. I'm more upset when I don't say something that I should have than when I keep. I regret things that I said. I'm not going to mention names. I'm giving you a checklist. I'm giving parents a checklist. I have a chiddush. Did I tell you about it, Chaim? Okay, so if you're interested, it's this Motzei Shabbos. I have top people. I have a Rav that I'm interviewing a Rav that dealt with a sex offender who moved into his community. I'll give you an advance notice. He called the guy up and he said, "You're not welcome in my shul." And the guy came in during Kriya Shema. I'm sorry, he did a class with his families, like an AA meeting. We were all in circles, 100 people around. I know because he invited me to talk to them about child safety. And he bought books for everybody. That's not a plug, but he just did. And this guy walked in the middle of Kriya Shema. That's going to be a nice interview, Chaim. I'm trying to get him on for Sunday night. His name is Rabbi Yaakov Glasser. He's a Rav in Passaic, New Jersey. And he went over to the guy. He stopped. He left. He went over to the guy, and he said, "Get out of here. We have children here. Get out of here. You're not welcome." And he said, "I'm in the middle of Shema." And the Rav said, "So am I. Get out of here." Those communities have less abuse. It's not the same everywhere. That's what I want to talk about. So that's what I really wanted to talk about. There are things that we can do as communities in terms of training, supporting victims, getting professional help for victims, all of it. There's so many things that we could do. I'm going to be talking about it, hopefully I'll be able to post it on some other platforms also, but if you have Instagram, feel free to start. Belina did this Motzei Shabbos. Thank you, Chaim. Anybody else? Rav, please.
Walter's books, what do you hold? Burnham?
I didn't answer it initially, Rav. I said that that's a personal thing that I'm not going to comment on because, you hear me, I don't tell people what to do. I wasn't comfortable with that. And I say, if somebody's isn't a poor person and they have, and they spent $300 on his books. And then I heard the other side. There was a Rebbitzin in London that made a talk about this, and she got me. And I said, I agree with her. She brought up some points specifically why. And no, I didn't say people should keep them. I said, it's not my place to. I'm not a Rav in a shul. If somebody came to me and asked me but to give to the public is different. Somebody calls me, it's different than if I just go out and share my thoughts. So I didn't want to do that, but I changed my mind after. One of the things she said was that he's making moral decisions, telling children what's good and what's not good, and that parcels him up. That's why I got to get it. She said another thing she said 3 points that were very, very powerful. And one of them I actually interviewed her on my Instagram page. It's still up there if you're interested. It's a Rebbitzin Esti Hanover. Her name is from. Oh, did I say Hanover? Hamilton. Yes. Thank you. Sorry. Yes. And she said that that really got me. She said that the second thing was, she said, what are you going to tell your kids 10 years from now? They're going to find out. They're going to, they'll be older now. Now you got 3-year-olds. What are you going to do when they become 13? And they say, Mommy, Ima, why did you leave these books? And I heard this guy did horrible things. Practice in front of the mirror. She didn't say that I said. When parents call me and they ask me if they should give like very out-of-the-box names to their children, I'm a very pragmatic guy. I say, should I give this name? Not for a family member, not naming for a grandparent. Thomas, they have his name is a little out of the box, whatever. I'm not judging, it's fine. But I say, go on the back porch, yell the name, and say, come home for supper. Okay, you want to give a name, whatever it is, Sebastian, whatever. So you say, hey, come home for supper. If you're okay yelling it in the back porch, then you can. I'm a pragmatic guy. So, I said, Lamaisa. But she said, the third thing was, she said that he told over stories there about people and changed the names. And some of those people he victimized, probably. So imagine those victims coming into a house and seeing someone have a book with this guy who tormented them. And so that's my answer. I initially said I'm not saying anything, and I was brave enough to change my mind. Anybody else, folks? Ladies? Anybody? Yes, please.
What do you say to that after that 48 hours?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. Good. Go to the head of the class. Great. So what do you say after 48 hours? We'll probably, at my age, you'll probably forget about it. No, but it's an excellent question. You have a conversation with them. You do what you would if you found out yourself. You'd sit down with them and talk about it and say, look, we're upset about it, that you got drunk. Take them to they'll tell you, I'm not addicted, I can stop at any time. So take them to an expert in parents don't have to know everything. In fact, it's very humbling. It's great if you say, I don't know. And you're humble enough to say, look, I don't know, I can't answer that question. One of my kids threw that at me once. I can stop anytime, right? So regarding smoking, whatever. So I said, let's go to Dr. Tursky. Ask him what addiction is. I can't define it well enough. All right, so I had access to him. Most people don't. But you can go to your pediatrician. You can go to anybody who's an expert in the field. So sit down and talk to them. And you might want to say, look, I'm not going to force you to, but I want you to do some tshuva for it. If you one of those things I spoke about was in terms of punishments and discipline. The word discipline actually comes from the word disciple. It's about teaching, not about punishing. So if you sit down with them, when I was a Rebbe in Yeshiva, I used to tell my kids, do you want to, they did something wrong. I was an 8th grade Rebbe. I volunteered for the track. They didn't use such politically correct words in those days, but the kids weren't matzliach yet, okay? So I had suicide mission, 13-year-olds, right? 13-year-olds, all boys and kids who weren't matzliach yet. So, by the time they came to my class, they were so fed up with Gemara and rabbis in school, and also the punishments that never worked with them. So I had to go out of the box with them. So I used to tell them, tshuva or, what do you want to do? Tshuva or punishment? Pick one. So it was hysterical. The kids loved it. I mean, they didn't like getting punished, but we used to have a real discussion about it. So I'm saying, think about it. You have a discussion with them without that anger and without the stick. They'll want to hear what you say if you're informed. This stunning research on, when I became a principal, almost, 28 years ago, I was not comfortable walking into classrooms because I figured the Rabbeim are going to, Horowitz is here, And one of my mentors, Rabbi Feitman, Zechat Tzaddik V'Racha, was mentored me for 6 years. He was my chinuch Rebbe. I miss him very much. And he showed me some research that teachers love when an informed principal comes in, who doesn't say, I saw you were drinking coffee, but someone who talks about the lessons and helps them and appreciates what you're doing and gets it. So that's the answer. Your children want to hear what you have to say. They don't want you to yell at them. They don't want you to carry on and, to make a fuss about it. So I would suggest that that's what you do after 48 hours. You sit down and you talk about it. Did I answer your question? Okay. Are we going to relocate now?
Just one second, I want to say.
Please, Rav.
So in everybody's behalf, I want to thank Rabbi Horowitz for a brilliant and moving and inspiring presentation. And I was saving the thank you that I really want to say, most of all, to Chaim Kastner for putting all this together for the end, because now we'll appreciate what he did. Incredible. You can't even imagine what goes into such an evening. It's not like you get somebody, he'll give a speech. It's all in the details, and the details were wonderful. So there will be some shiurim tonight, including the one that I'm giving in Mishnah Berurah Dirshu. There'll be at 9:05. There will be a Daf Yomi, and I don't think there's a Ma'ariv till 9:45. Do any of the men want to daven right away? So we might make a Ma'ariv, but otherwise I think we're going to stick to the 9:45. And anyway, Rabbi Horowitz will be saying more brilliant, wonderful things. I think the Kollel is going to come up, I believe, and Rabbi Horowitz is going to go down. It's Yerida L'Tzarech Aliyah. All right. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. Everybody should have nachas from children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren.